Hey guys, how's it going? This is Natinator, and welcome back to your weekly dose of Creepypasta. Hope you're all doing well. Thank God it's the weekend, and time for another story. We'll be right on with it as soon as we've given our most heartfelt thanks to the members of the Coven over on Patreon. Shoutouts as always to the Disciples, Auntie Pat, Backwards D-Dog, Bubbly Panda, Tiffany, Tomboy Top Uwu, Patrick White, Common Sense Connoisseur, and Rashad Koake. Thank you all so much for the continued support, and thank you guys out there spreading love in the comments. Appreciate you all. Now, as always, turn out the lights, get comfortable, and let the story begin. I'm posting this here, as well as on a few other forums, because I'm hoping that some tech-savvy user among you will be able to explain what happened on my iPhone a couple of nights ago. Maybe you'll know where it came from. Maybe one of you will have seen it yourself. I really do hope you can help, because I'm not sure I want to go to the authorities, not after what I think I saw on that video. It happened at about 10:30 in the evening. I was at home. I live alone, so sadly nobody else saw what happened, and my phone was plugged into its charger. It's an iPhone 5S, and even though it's a few years old, the phone has never given me any cause for concern. I've got a nagging ankle injury, and was reading a book in my armchair with my foot up on the coffee table, and not in contact with the phone at all, I hasten to add, when I heard a strange hissing sound. It took me a few seconds to pinpoint the source of the noise, but eventually I realized it was coming from my phone, or more specifically, the video that had started to play on its screen. The hiss was actually ambient noise, the empty sound of nothing as a microphone struggles to record any discernible soundtrack. It took me a while to realize that the screen wasn't actually blank either. Instead, it was depicting a black screen, empty except for a series of 11 letters in the bottom right, letters that seemed to flicker and constantly change, seemingly scrolling through the alphabet at random. Every now and then, these letters would cease their constant shifting to flash a brief message at me. I can't remember what a lot of these said. To be honest, I didn't think it was that important at first. Among the messages I do remember were, "Please smile," and "Save them all." But there was one that cropped up again and again. It simply read, "The Tortoise." I thought that maybe I'd left YouTube running, or perhaps this was an auto-playing Facebook video, but as I reached out to hit the menu button, the screen changed once again. Slowly, the camera pulled back, and I realized that the black background was actually a grainy black and white, extreme close-up of the pupil of an eye. In time, the iris became visible, then the tiny network of blood vessels that crisscrossed the white of the eye. The camera continued to pull back, and for a split second, I realized that the eye was not actually attached to anybody, that it had been removed and was laying on a dirty stone floor. Then, as soon as that realization dawned on me, a scuffed black boot dropped into frame, stamping down onto the loose organ and causing it to burst, splattering a dark ichor across the floor. Then the camera panned up, revealing a long hallway. It was very poorly lit, so it was difficult to work out what exactly was happening. But at this point, a tuneless whistling started up, and the camera jerkily advanced along the dark hallway. At the end of the corridor, it was possible to discern the shape of a door, closed, but with a dim pool of light emanating from the crack beneath it. The light flickered and ebbed, as if cast by an open fire, or perhaps a candle flame. The whole time this was going on, the letters kept shifting, giving me message after message. I am your she was, rain of tears. He saw you crying. And of course, the tortoise, over and over again. I think the whistling may have been coming from the camera operator as he proceeded along that darkened hallway. There were closed doors on either side, but no windows, no visible source of light, except for that quivering glow at the end of the hall, spilling forth from the plain, dark, wooden door. At first, I thought it was an arty film project, all style and no substance. I still hope it is, but I'm struggling to convince myself. I might have managed to if it wasn't for what happened next. The film started to cut away from the cameraman's procession along the hallway, but not before I noticed he moved with an odd gait, a hitching, uneven movement. The film then started to flash a number of very quick micro scenes on the screen, each just a couple of frames long, before cutting back to the slow advance toward the battered, closed door. It was those snippets of film that scared me. At first they were disturbing. A battered one-eyed teddy bear with a ragged tear in its stomach. Something wet and twitching inside. What looked like an iron bathtub filled to the brim with writhing maggots. A burlap sack that suddenly spasmed as if something within was struggling to get out. But as they continued, still undercut with the lumbering advance of the whistling cameraman, they became worse and worse. A hand nailed to a wall, a burning car, human shapes thrashing inside, a razor slicing open pale human skin, and a gout of dark blood from the wound. All along, the steady tick of text in the corner continued. Judas ate her. No more blood. The tortoise. The last few images flashed so quickly that I couldn't quite work out what they were, but what I think I saw there is too vile, too nauseating to repeat here. I hope it was fake. Just sick but well-executed special effects and clever camera work. I really hope it was. Those images, the quick flashes of the worst, most vile acts of obscene cruelty, left me feeling sickened, sweat running down my brow even as I was unable to tear my gaze from the screen. As the anonymous cameraman continued his uneven, loping procession along the corridor, still whistling in that sad, shrill, tuneless way, I realized I could hear another sound. Something barely perceptible, but slowly becoming louder, as if he was drawing nearer to it. It was a noise that made my head spin, my pulse quickening as I realized what it was. the sound of children crying inconsolably. As the cameraman grew ever closer, I realized that the helpless sobs were coming from beyond the door. With every heavy-footed step, they became louder, even more terrified, as if they were aware of a terrible impending fate. I wanted to look away, to turn off the phone, to throw it far, far away. Anything to avoid seeing the unspeakable horror that I was now so sure would unfold. But I froze, too scared to move. Finally, the cameraman stopped, mere inches from the door, and then a grubby, grimy hand came into view, coated in a dark, viscous liquid, and rested gently against the dusty wood. All at once, he stopped whistling. He stood like that for what felt like hours, but in truth could have only been a few seconds, listening to the increasingly agitated crying coming from the room before him. In the corner, the text flashed away. The end comes. Will you forget? Make him stop. The tortoise. The tortoise. The tortoise. Then, without warning, the silent cameraman whispered something, so quietly, so softly, that it was almost impossible to detect, before suddenly pushing the door open. As he did so, the voices within suddenly rose into a panicked crescendo of screams, and the film abruptly ended. I sat there for a few moments, heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't even realized it, but I'd been holding my breath for Christ alone knew how long now, and I, finally, let loose a long, shaky exhaltation as I wiped my brow and blinked back tears. It took some time before I was able to touch my phone, almost as if I expected it to bite me when my skin made contact with it, as if the evil I detected in that video had somehow contaminated it. Finally, I did so and pressed the menu key. The phone switched on as normal. As I quickly checked my apps, my emails, and my camera, each revealed the same result. Not the slightest hint of anything out of the ordinary. YouTube wasn't active. There were no videos on my Facebook feed. I hadn't received any new WhatsApp messages or emails. Everything was exactly as it should be. It took me a long time to get to sleep that night, even after pouring myself what was probably a quadruple scotch with shaking hands, then hurriedly gulping it down. After a night of fitful sleep, I decided to recruit some assistants to get to the bottom of what had happened. I'm close friends with this guy, Dan, who works in our IT department. We regularly do lunch together, and I made sure to seek him out in the office before we went to our usual burger joint to discuss the video. The tortoise?" he asked, spraying crumbs as he ate his cheeseburger. Never heard of it. Why?" I explained, and he listened carefully, chewing away at first, then putting down the burger and listening more intently when I got to the more disturbing parts of the film. Finally, I finished explaining, and Dan paused a second before asking me some straightforward questions. Are you sure you weren't running video from an app? Have you checked your videos for the film? What about that cloud? Is your phone jailbroken? I answered each one thoughtfully and carefully, and I could see that he was genuinely curious about what might have caused this phenomenon. "Could it be a virus?" I asked. Well, in theory, yes, it could be, Dan replied, rubbing his stubbly chin absent-mindedly as he thought about it. I mean, iPhone viruses do exist, but there are hardly any out there in the wild, least of all ones which can infect an unjailbroken phone. It's common knowledge that security companies and other tech firms have created viruses, purely as proof of concept and for research purposes, but I don't think I've ever come across one roaming free, if you catch my drift. So, what happened? I asked. You say it was called the Tortoise? Dan asked as he pushed the last of his burger into his mouth. I'll do some research tonight. Troll around the right places online, then if you bring your phone down to the IT office tomorrow morning, I'll take a look at it and see what I can find, cool? Very, I replied, relieved, and promptly picked up the check. It was the least I could do. That night, nothing happened, probably because I switched off my iPhone and didn't touch it all night. I even started to think that everything was probably going to be okay, that Dan's expertise in the field would soon yield a logical explanation for the bizarre events of the evening that I saw the tortoise. As reassured as I might have felt during my waking hours, that night, my dreams were disturbed, my sleep fitful. All night I heard that whispering voice, harsh yet soft, the words familiar, but just beyond my comprehension. When I woke the next day, I once again felt an overwhelming sense of anxiety, and I traveled to the office with an uncommon sense of urgency. I wanted to talk to Dan, to find out what he had discovered, to give him access to my phone so that he might unlock the secrets of that nightmarish video. Upon reaching my place of work, I hurried to the graveyard of broken and outdated computers that served as the IT department's office. It was quiet, which was unsurprising since I had arrived more than 30 minutes early. I knocked on the door, only to be greeted by a familiar voice. Not Dan, but Richie, his colleague, a tall, thin guy with long dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard that I'd spoken to a handful of times before when my Mac was acting temperamental. He explained that Dan wasn't in yet, and after he asked whether he could help, I explained, with more than a hint of disappointment, that I'd come back later and talk to Dan then. Come 1 o'clock, I hurried down to the dingy office once more, only to be met by a decidedly stressed-looking Richie. He hasn't turned up, he huffed, clearly very busy. Didn't even call in sick. I'm furious. Even then, as I apologized for taking up his time and backed out of the doorway, I still didn't piece it together. That was 3 days ago, and Dan hasn't come to work since. He isn't at home, and any attempt to call him is met with an automated message informing the caller that his phone is switched off. I'm worried, genuinely, that his attempt to uncover the truth behind the tortoise could have brought him ill. And now, with that in mind, I'm starting to become terrified for my own well-being. This is why I'm reaching out to each and every one of you for help. I think I might be in real trouble, the very worst kind. Yes, because I received the video, but for one other reason. Last night, my dreams were again haunted by that lurching march along the dim hallway. I heard the tuneless whistle, and those heartbreaking sobs from the children beyond the dark, filthy wooden door. Then, I heard something else. The thing that woke me with a terrified cry, my heart thumping as I clawed at the cold, sweat-drenched blankets tangled around my flailing limbs. Once again, I'd heard those whispered words that came before the screams, before the cameraman had stopped filming. I heard those words, but this time, I understood them, my mind finally deciphering them. Before he'd advanced into that room, before he'd committed whatever unspeakable atrocities on his helpless prey within, he'd said my name.